Okay, so good morning, everyone. It is a real pleasure addressing this. I think the previous panel was setting the scene for us because infrastructure and how the country's readiness to accommodate infrastructure needs in order to accelerate the vision 2035 of Cyprus, in order to enhance the evolving tech and IT ecosystem that we envision, it becomes paramount. And this session, which we will be dealing with now, is focused basically on the housing aspect of infrastructure. We've heard previously a lot of talk about education, commuting and traffic, accessibility to the island, healthcare, and all these things maybe require their own panel. But here we will just dive into the housing aspect of it. Before I introduce the panelists and why we came up with this composition and what each will bring into the table, when we talk about the housing market, and then we are in the Tech Island framework, which it has a motto of bringing the best talent in Cyprus. I think housing and the challenges that the market is facing is broader than just the ICT sector. It's a social issue. It has social repercussions. And I think it was mentioned earlier by Mary that it has spillover effects in the broader society. So maybe we should deal with this conversation as a broader social issue. We should deal with this conversation as the community and the society beyond just this ecosystem. And I am sure that most of you will agree that it's been at the headlines and it's been increasingly becoming an item that is high on the agenda. If I recall last year, I am personally very enthusiastic about the housing market because I am by practice a real estate economist. So I think if I even look at last year's Reflect and Tech Island agendas, there were no items focused on housing. This year there are two. There was previously another workshop, and I am glad to see it's getting a lot of attention. So there is a growing concern amongst communities, and there is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think our role here is to deep dive into the housing market, to deep dive into the challenges that families, tech families and beyond are facing today, and maybe consider how public policy solutions can help alleviate and address these issues. So in order to structure this discussion, we have assembled a panel that has a very rounded role in this. So let me introduce the panelists. Yiannis Misirlis. Yiannis Misirlis is the founding director of Imperio, but also here mostly in his capacity as a deputy chairman of the London Buildings Association, the Developers Association. Yiannis brings the industry perspective to the equation. He has been active and has been representing local bodies in the development and construction sector for a while, so he can give us a perspective of the industry and the challenges that lead to the situation today. Next to him, we have Petr Valov, who is the co-founder and CEO of Exness, and he's also a board member of Tech Island. Petr, we would like to have your angle as an investor who has been looking at this country for the past 10 years. And according to my data, one of the, I'll mention later with your permission, but if I estimate all of your investments on the island, they're quite sizable. So we'd like to hear the journey of how you came here and what do you see as a future. And Christiana Erotokritou. Christiana, as a member of the House of Representatives, also a chairwoman, which is more particular of the Budget and Finance Committee of the Parliament, and also as a vice chairwoman of the Democratic Party. Hi, Christiana. I think Christiana, we can indulge in public policy discussions around these topic, and that's why we have industry, investors, maybe also as an occupier, like this angle from Peter, and Christiana coming from the public policy and representing the legislative bodies of the state. So I think having said that, starting in the order here, I would say, Yiannis, there's an unprecedented situation when it comes to demand-supply balances. It's often quoted that it's a supply issue that we're dealing with here that's been mounting over the years, and it has been accelerated following recent events that shifted demographics. What is your take about the situation, and how would you analyze the current state of affairs when it comes to the housing market and affordability concerns?
Thank you, Constantinos. You're absolutely right. There is a chronic imbalance between supply and demand. Supply has been consistently lower than demand. And this discussion is, rightly said, a social issue. It's today part of this panel because demand is helped by the technology sector, but the problem has existed for almost a decade. I mean, if we go back, we saw the crisis of 2013 limiting the supply of acceptable units on the island. Then a couple of years later, demand started picking up, but supply of this kind of units that are now in demand has never picked up. The demand at that time was driven by mostly super prime real estate because of a global trend and regional incentives. And most of the supply was directed towards satisfying that demand. So there is very good reasons why there was an imbalance, but we should have been in a position to identify these trends and come up with proposals to solve this issue at least by 2018, and we didn't react, and that's why we are facing this kind of the problem today. I cannot blame anybody. There's nobody to blame for this imbalance right now, at least in the industry, because people were reacting to what they were seeing at that time. And even today, I think the most natural, the most obvious question somebody would ask, at least the industry, us as developers, is, okay, you see restricted supply, why don't you just build more? Well, it's not so easy. Somebody has to see the market dynamics today. We have high inflation, we have high interest rates. It's quite difficult to get a loan, a construction loan from a bank. So all of these, we have high construction cost, supply chain issues globally, and this affects Cyprus also. So the risk for the average developer is increased. On top of that, what happened in the last 3-4 years since COVID is that some of the major markets on the demand side for property developers have shut. We had China with the strict COVID measures completely shut down as potential market. And then the war came. And one of the biggest markets was also kind of isolated from the island. Nobody's selling to Russians in Russia anymore. So for the average developer, there is a high insecurity today. And this is why many traditional companies that used to be able to supply the industry with units are not commencing any new developments right now, or are thinking, twice and 3 times about starting a new project. This is another factor why supply is quite limited. And yes, I agree that we should take steps, and as part of this discussion, we can actually propose a few things. What should be done to increase supply? Because supply is not only restricted in itself, it has a knock-on effect on prices. And that's causing the social issue which we referred to before. Purchase prices and rental prices at the same time. If you want, I can stop here and we can continue the discussion once my...
Well, I mean, think what I take here is heightened risks, insecurity, and lack of visibility that should match the returns of an investor. But at the same time, we need to find a way to increase supply. I think it was mentioned earlier, housing affordability constraints are a European phenomenon. It's not just a local. There is a particularity in Cyprus that has to do with where we're coming from. And what I hear from you is, like, if we put a bit of context here, and I think that will be my transition to you, Peter, because you've been in this market, 10 years, right? So if we go back to this market 10 years, we had the collapse of the industry amidst the financial crisis. That took away most of the suppliers of the market, contractors, developers, etc. The market shrunk, and inevitably in a market of low confidence and insecurity. Until 2016, there was a modest recovery in the market, but albeit it was constrained. And then there was the investment program. That's when all of the existing suppliers and then all of the new suppliers, either local or international, focused in a product that's predominantly served that product, which means that we have another 4 years, 16, 17, 18, 19, maybe part of 20, where the majority of the economic suppliers in this sector are delivering mainly that product. And then we have COVID, which inevitably slowed down and restricted the supply. And so all of this, if you consider that, combined with a country which, even though we have a low fertility rate, I think the lowest in Europe, we still have a growth in the population, which spiked following recent events. It's inevitably that the situation in Cyprus may be relatively exacerbated, because exactly we haven't been delivering the product that we need today, and the recent events just spike that and just put us into this table. So saying that and holding risks, rewards of developer uncertainty, Peter, you've been investing in this island for the past 10 years, hundreds of millions in real estate. Many are land projects that you plan to develop. Others are as an occupier. What has been this journey? What brought you here? What has been the driver for this investment? And what do you see as an outlook amidst this conversation?
Yes, we started our investments a few years ago when we wanted to just satisfy needs of our people, of our employees. And there are many companies who relocated many employees here. And I would say the quality of existing rental market was quite low as well. We wanted to try to invest in something decent. But as an investor, I talked to all developers in Limassol. I found only, let's say, 1.5 projects which I could invest. So it's not just, so they was not involved in building residences for normal people. I wouldn't say affordable, but for people with a normal salary could afford to buy or rent. It's one of big problem, as Mr. Yiannis rightly said. It was 10 years, the decade of investment in very luxury property. Now they downgraded to something like from $500,000 to $1 million range, which still is not the range of affordability for the people. As an investor, I see, I could add one more point why it's happening as well. It's a macroeconomic situation. If you try to find information about other cities, in a previous panel discussion, it was also mentioned that in Ireland is the same problem. So now it's in Europe, in US, in many countries, it's the same problem. The problem happened because increasing bank rates, making mortgaging inaccessible, and when people start leaving the family house and to their own, they prefer to rent, not to buy, because they don't use mortgage nowadays. That's increased rental prices everywhere in the world. So there are, I would say, 3 main components in Cyprus. So one of is macroeconomics, second is expatriates, especially after the war, very rapid relocation. And the third one is basically the developing industry was focused on something else, not for that houses, whereas the Greek Cypriot population is also grew from that time. So that's where we are. As investor, I also see another problem. Every investor is kind of, I wouldn't say smart people, but they calculate everything. Because investment is just a game when you try to find lower risk and higher premium. Now with the high bank rates, you can go to bank and put money on deposit and get 4.5% short term. You can buy some bonds. You can buy governmental bonds of Cyprus, for example. Cyprus, Greece governmental bonds, 10 years maturity, give you 4.03% yield every year. I also invest in residential real estate for rental purposes. We calculate our models, and the most realistic scenario is a 4.5% yield from what we invest. So basically, if you're an investor and if you're just a wise investor, you would not invest in Cyprus property for rental reasons. You better buy governmental bond of Cyprus if you want to invest in Cyprus. So that's the macroeconomic situation. So the money become very expensive. So if few years ago during COVID era, when the bank rates was zero and even negative, it was in phrases that cash is trash, and it was very strange things. Now cash is very expensive. Now money is very, very expensive. And if Cyprus want to attract investors, it need to attract them somehow. Otherwise they go to other places and invest money in other stuff. So I think the big problem here is that with this quality of investment. And I am as an investor say that this is one of the most taxable investment and industry. So it's at least 7 different taxes and levies what we pay overall in construction, in rental, in providing it to employees. So I believe that at least for some period of time, the taxation could be lower to attract more investors. If you compare it with other cities, in the United States, in Europe as well, there are a lot of projects which build to rent, which build specifically to rent it. Thousands, 10,000s of units, and pension funds invest in such units. So it's a huge business. In Cyprus, it's not existent. Also in Cyprus, it's demotivation mechanism for rental market. As far as I know, there are from 20 to 30,000 of units are empty for different reasons. It's because it's a first residence, VAT reduction does not allow you to rent. Also all flats bought for citizenship program, for golden visa, it's a gray area. Rich people don't want to risk and rent it out because something could happen with their visa or passport. So there are a lot of units just basically empty, and maybe this is low-hanging fruits. And I will finish this with just the fact that as I represent also the IT industry is almost stuck with the growth. Now we represent 13% of GDP. We are second one, or even maybe the biggest one industry, among the biggest, let's say, industries. And we were one of the key drivers of economy for the last years. But in order to further grow, we need to resolve this situation. Because now if you relocate a company with like 50 people, for example, you go to real estate agent, and the real estate agent immediately say, okay, you cannot find anything less than 3,000 euro. Let's try to maybe 2.5. So it's even impossible to explain what is the real price in Limassol. Maybe it's 1,500, maybe 3,000, maybe 1,000. So there are no even price for the flats here. So it's really block us from further development. So it's both social problem, we all see that, but it's also a problem for business. Business cannot grow further, international business, without resolving this problem. And as I represent both sides of, as I said, occupier, it's not a good word, but occupier and investor, we as a companies, at least 10 companies from our association are ready to invest in real estate and are already doing them. But we are not developers, we are not constructors, so we're investors. We need good projects. It's almost not exist. And I deliver this message to developers all the time that you need to start building that with a lower marginality but with a higher scale. But also something to make it less taxable, because otherwise if you have 100 million, it's not good to invest it in residential real estate. You better buy bonds and with a high liquidity and don't care about especially if you don't live in Cyprus. If you want to attract foreign investors, why foreign investors would invest in that if they can have other means to do that? So this is it from my side, at least for now. Thank you.
Very, very interesting, crystal clear. I think transitioning to you, Christiana, I hold that there are structural macro considerations that make investments in this space difficult. I think he mentioned you even disincentivized to do it. Some of which are internal, some of which are brought on us. Because money is very expensive and it's a global phenomenon. And then you talked about taxes. That is one of the industries that is mostly taxed. You mentioned 7 different taxes and levies. And at the same time, you tapped on there is a short-term consideration. You said 20, 30,000 units are empty at the moment for various reasons. And then there's a longer term. I think, Christiana, transitioning to you, if real estate supply is inevitably sticky from the moment you decide to draw the designs and go to the planning authorities to get the permit and then start digging, etc. It takes you 3 years to deliver a product, at least, yeah. So I mean, anything that we talk about now will inevitably have a lagging effect. And I think it sounds like there's an opportunity now and there's a momentum in this ever existing opportunity to cultivate on these hub efforts. So how do you see, from 2 angles, releasing this stock into the market in a shorter term? Are there any thoughts there? Is this something that at the policy level you are considering? And secondly, in acknowledging that not only it is a major social issue, but also an obstacle for growth in promising sectors like the ICT, what is your views in terms of where we should be going, whether this is schemes or incentives or what have you? I just wanted your input on these 2 different aspects.
Sure, Constantinos, thank you very much. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be here. In order to avoid repeating the comments that were made before, with which I agree.
A bit closer, yeah.
Well, usually in Parliament they complain that I
That's
speak
great.
too loudly. So here it's the other way around. Okay. I agree with the comments that Peter and Yiannis have made beforehand. The reasons why we're here today and we have a very restricted supply, and a very high demand are various and are due to various reasons, which there's no point in taking the time to analyze them now. But right now, we're at the point where we have a limited supply and we have an increased demand. Now, in the past, in Parliament, and let me here point out that obviously I do not speak for the government, but I am a member of the Parliament, but the executive and the legislature are 2 completely distinct powers. Now, we in the past in Parliament, we have legislated on tax incentives, and tax incentives obviously is something that has worked, it will work, and it will continue to work in the future. However, tax incentives is only part of the bigger picture, and as Aristotle said, the whole picture is usually greater than the sum of its parts. So tax is one aspect on which I am sure that we will continue as a jurisdiction to be attractive on a transparent level as far as the attractiveness of the country for not only tech companies, but FDI overall. No. Now, today in Cyprus, we have the phenomenon where we want to be attractive for FDI and tech companies, but at the same time, we want to have affordable housing for the local population. So we have to unlock and solve all the problems that hinder the development of these 2 sectors. First of all, the procedure, Yiannis might be more apt to talk about that. The procedure today followed by governmental authorities in order to allow the development of a building is unbelievably bureaucratic and really has to come up to international standards. Number 2, maybe local councils, the ministries, all stakeholders can start the dialogue with a specific endpoint on reconfiguring the zoning policies. Zoning has worked in the past, has solved many problems in the past, will help reinvigorate the market and could solve quite a few problems. At the same time, maybe we can talk about accelerated depreciation. Accelerated depreciation might be something that will also immediately reinvigorate the market and start making people thinking of putting their efforts and their energy into the development sector again in Cyprus. Tax incentives, B2R. This is a shortcoming, obviously, here in Cyprus. There are no B2R programs. It has not been talked about. It has not been discussed. But obviously, those are challenges that we will face in the future. A decision has to come from the executive. And once and if that decision comes from the executive, I am sure that the legislature will take it into account. We have to be able, though, to identify that we have there is a different nature to the problem. We have a short-term problem and we have a medium to long-term problem. As far as short-term solutions are concerned, Peter talked about 20,000 dormant units. If I am not mistaken, with the last survey of the Cyprus Technical Institute, these units are 33,000. So we have 33,000 dormant housing units in Cyprus, the owners of whom are not willing or not interested, or just they don't see that it is profitable for them to put their units in the market. So what can we do about that? The answers are quite simple, actually. But somebody has to put them into practice, and somebody has to reinvigorate this huge, idle, available, right now market that we have in Cyprus of these 33 or 28 or 29 dormant housing units. So we need a national policy that will come, obviously, from the executive that will touch upon all these issues.
I just wanted to add, Christiana, that I'm very happy that you touched both the short-term and long-term planning, and I'm very happy that you brought it up, Peter. 33,000, that's an astonishing number. I think Andreas Nocleos earlier mentioned about a net inflow of 18,000 people last year. That would have solved part of the problem. Not that simple, but still. So I would say that even just to take a step back, and since all of these things that you mentioned are part of reconfiguring the housing policy of the state, any government is responsible to govern the housing policy, and so far, ever since I remember, mostly housing policies have been focused on measures around social housing rather than creating means to make them more affordable. And either these take the form of supporting acquisition of first residence, whether you are state aid for refugees, multi-child families, and so on and so forth. These incentives have been also, if you think about it, they're mostly pro-buying. In order to make these incentives accessible, you have to be a buyer. Yiannis mentioned earlier construction costs, interest rates, etc. If it's so costly to buy, ratios are ridiculous now. I mean, I will use this word consciously. So how is this housing policy relevant? And I think Constantinos Petridis mentioned earlier that ever need to revamp the housing policy. So I wanted your comment on this.
Well, my comment is quite simple. It has to be revamped, and it has to be done yesterday, because all these are drags on the demand that is today in the market. If we have all these classes of people that need to be housed, obviously, this will take up the available supply that we have in the market, and it will be a drag on the development of industries that we want to attract and maintain and retain here in Cyprus. So yes, these are existing problems. They have to be solved by the state. But one thing that I am personally, and I speak in my personal capacity, that I am very adamant about is a factor of time. In Cyprus, we do not seem to evaluate how important the time factor is in the implementation of a decision. If you make the right decision, but you implement it 10 years down the line, it's as if you've never made the right decision in the first place. You need to be able to make the right decisions, but you have to be able to implement them immediately. So we have to tackle the problem with the refugees. We have to tackle the problem with the housing regarding university students. I come from Nicosia. I live in Nicosia. The University of Cyprus, that is based in Nicosia, has 10,000 students. And that is brilliant. And I think that we should be aiming for more students. We should be aiming for 12 or 15 or 20. And we should be aiming for overseas students as well, to keep coming in more and more numbers to Nicosia. But we only have about 170 dorms. So we have 9,830 fresh students looking for accommodation in the municipality of Nicosia every year. Isn't that a drag on the rest of the market? Of course it is. Isn't it making housing less affordable for the rest of the market? Of course it is. So we have to be able to compartmentalize the problems, to give specific solutions for the specific problems, whether this is student housing, if it is refugee housing, if it is to attract FDI, to attract more foreign companies. We have to be able to give the specific solutions to the specific problems, but to do it in a timely manner, immediately.
Constantino, if I may clarify on some terms that we're using so we don't confuse the audience. Construction cost has increased because of the reasons we mentioned before. Construction, cost of construction material, cost of money, supply chain issues, etc. But prices are driven by the market, not by the cost of construction. So if we're here asking the authorities to look at this problem, the point of view should not be incentives to reduce the cost of construction. We're asking something completely different. It's an incentive to increase supply, because increased supply will take care of the asking prices.
And on that note, Yiannis, I think one of the components of our conversation is supplying can be funneled into the rental market. And you mentioned earlier, Peter, BTR, you touched upon it a bit. Are there examples from around the world that we can tap on and consider when it comes to creating a scheme that effectively encourages investments and flowing capital like you and the investors you represent in rented products? And just saying that, I want to say that it is a reality, not only in Cyprus, that private residence rentals and investing in rented affordable housing is one of the prominent sectors that are being invested around Europe. Our surveys as PwC indicate that there's a shift away from traditional sectors and a move towards this. So it's clearly a European trend. That would enable absorbing and bringing in capital, since you mentioned about the cost of money, bringing in capital here. So what are the takes from the world that we can use and develop?
Yes, we made analysis of other European countries. Many of them do a lot of things, like Spain, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, if I'm not mistaken. So we found 6 countries which for the last 10 years, some of them quite recently, introduced frameworks to increase supply in the rental market. Usually it's complex of measures. Usually it's something related to VAT reduction. It's related to profit tax for rental business. It's also increasing depreciation rate, as Christiana mentioned. It's increasing density for lands. So there are usually like a framework how to facilitate that business. For example, in Spain, if I'm not mistaken, just recently accepted, passed a new law with a 4% VAT for this type of business. So they're already doing that because the problem exists, I think, already for many years, and now just exacerbated with the high rates. So yes, other countries do a lot. And Cyprus, fortunately, unfortunately, it was always built to sell model. So all developers build it to sell. It was many customers from abroad. So it was quite a business model. It's not good or bad, it just was a model for Cyprus. So now it's time to look for other models for other countries, and I believe this is the best time to do that.
May I add on this?
Yes, Yanni, please.
Okay, this is not an asking panel, so we're not asking for 10 or 20 incentives to be thrown there on the market. Probably the best thing to do is to do this with a plan. And one thing that this island is lacking is a plan for the island. We should look at the next 20, 30 years and create a master plan of where we want to go and what we need to do. And this should include planning incentives, tax incentives, everything that we're mentioning today. But it shouldn't be all there, out there at the same time. With regards to whether it has been a build-to-sell market, yes, it has been, but for very good reasons. There has never been incentives for investors to come and purchase large number of units so they can rent them out on the market. I mean, we had this discussion with PIMCO back in 2015, because this is one of the things they do. They go to a country, they team up with a local developer, and they build thousands of units, and they rent them. They profit on higher rental yields and capital appreciation. And I'm not talking only about PIMCO. We should be able, as a country, to attract the likes of PIMCO, smaller kind of investors, or investors that are already on the island. But yes, we need serious tax incentives for this to actually happen.
Great. Okay, so we had a 45-minute slot for this. We have another 8 minutes. I was asked to encourage some participation from the audience. So time for some Q&A, and then I will give each one of you a minute to wrap up with some thoughts. Christiana, I've taken a lot of notes which I will share with you after the event, so that you can take back with you. So yes, please, any questions and towards the panelists?
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Sergey, and I'm a founder of PropTech startup. We're actually making digital tools for real estate industry. Thank you very much for this open discussion. I was listening to your points, and to me, it was like connecting dots in the sky. Mr. Yiannis was saying there's a huge problem of supply. And we're talking on daily business with different clients and asking them, you're real estate developers. Supply is huge. Why you're not building? That's no-brainer. You can make some money. And they're saying like, look, you know, it takes so much time to get all the papers. All the procedures are so inefficient, and that's exactly what Christiana was saying. The bureaucracy procedures are taking so much time, and to the point of Peter, when investors are taking or building models, financial models, and when the money is so expensive, when it takes 3 years to get a permit, your IRR is just so low, you are not investing, and that's a vicious cycle. So we're talking about this with our clients, with our friends from the PropTech industry of Cyprus. And on one hand, listening to the first panel, to your points, we're quite excited because we do understand that digitalization of the market of the industry is one of the tools which can play with the efficiency and can move the market forward. And I'm quite happy to realize it because that's our market in front of us and it's going to be inevitably growing. But on the other hand, being realistic, we're talking on daily basis with different clients, with different companies, average companies as you call it, and we see the gap or the readiness to go digital, to go efficient. The procedures gaps are so huge between the average market player and the panelists who are basically representing the most advanced companies in Cyprus. So every time ourselves as companies who are providing digital tools to improve efficiency, we have to kind of educate every client how everything is working. And that makes us sad on one hand, but on the other hand, we understand that such panels, such discussions are needed to happen not once a year, but on a constant basis. With having this idea in mind, I'm actually proud to say for the first time openly that we teamed up with a few companies came with the idea of building real estate working group with support of TechIsland. We came with this idea to TechIsland, and it was supported. So I'm very happy to say that since basically today, real estate working group with support of TechIsland is starting to operate, and we are basically working on the agenda right now to support the PropTech companies who are operating here, to partner with different industry players to move the things forward, to study the best practices which are happening in the world, to develop the industry. And when we took at the some statistics preparing this idea, and regarding the permits and the procedures, which Yiannis and Christiana were saying, we took a look at the rating of doing business regarding the permits perspective. You can Google it. I'll come to it. And getting a permit in Cyprus, if you take the rating, is as fast as in Cambodia. That's kinda a symbol how that works and what we can improve. Finally, coming to my question. As we were saying in the beginning, last year, we didn't even talk about real estate. Today, we touched this topic. If in a year, in this festival, Reflect 2024, we come together one more time, what kind of tangible results should happen so everyone could say, hell yes, the industry is moving into the right direction. Something has changed and the results already here from the last year. So from each perspective of the panelists, because you present pretty different, let's say, angles, what would be your points to say we're doing something good here?
Thank you, Sergey. Excuse all the Cambodians in the audience for the reference, if there are any. I think there's a point about digitalization. It was mentioned earlier. Yiannis, do you want to comment on? It has to do with the processes, and we're all glad. I mentioned earlier that this is surfacing as a high priority aspect in the agenda of these conversations. I'm sure in the next one, in the next year, we have even more attention. Hopefully, we've made progress. So, as an industry representative, can you cover some parts of this?
Yes, well, Sergey and everybody else who thinks that permit issuance takes long, well, they're all absolutely right. It takes too long. And it creates two things. First of all, you're very slow reacting to the demand today, because whatever you plan, it's permitted 3 years later. So you cannot satisfy today's needs of the market. And then as we measure everything, especially the investors in IRR, the cost grows because you have to wait 3 years for permits. So yes, this is a problem and we need to solve it. We as Imperio, we have one project which is satisfying this kind of market segment, and we were able to look at the trend 5 years ago. Now we're in year 5 since the inception. It's a successful project, but yes, 5 years. It shouldn't be that way. So what we would like to be talking about next year, or what we want to see to happen between now and Reflect 24, first of all, to lay the correct framework for solving the long-term issues of this industry. I liked Christiana's separation before as an immediate problem and a medium to long-term problem. So we need to lay down the factors that we have to work on and take some decisions and react on what the market needs today, but looking forward. And we need to see how and what we can do immediately to make this problem a little bit softer, not only for the employees of the tech industry, but for the society as a whole. The issue of a supply and demand exists because we're all fans of the free markets. But this is the time, if ever, that we need some clever, controlled government intervention so the social problem doesn't become much bigger and people don't suffer.
If I can add to that, yes, to the point that Sergey just made. Again, let me just reiterate that I do not speak for the government. I speak for my party. But I think one of the shortcomings in this country is the fact that we have never placed, we never really evaluated the importance of procedures, governmental procedures. So procedures have to be every day, every single month, every single year, they have to be reviewed, they have to be reconfigured, they have to be updated, and they have to be in line with what is happening in the market and in the private sector. I think one of the problems that we have in Cyprus, and this is a policy that my party has many a times said publicly, is that we're not reviewing procedures and requirements in order to keep up with what the problems are in the open market. We're quite happy, and maybe, let me use the term, quite safe in just repeating what we have always been doing, what we have always been asking for, what have we always been requiring for, because we feel that we are in a safe zone and we do not really need to do anything in a different way. But I think that the world has moved to a different place and to a different phase, and we have to realize in Cyprus, public sector and private sector, that we have to be bigger, better, faster, quicker. Unless we do that and we come into the era, and I think that one of the big pluses lately is the RRF plan, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, one of the pillars of which is e-government. That has to be implemented in Cyprus better, quicker, faster, because we need it to cover the time that we have lost in the past few years in just not reviewing our policies, not reviewing our procedures, and just doing the same thing with pen and paper in our hand over and over again. Thanks.
Thank you, Christiana.
Maybe add a bit about digitalization as well. So I think it's crucially important, and the president is always repeating that, but it should be a huge determination of the government to, because it's not just making it digital, it's to change the whole internal procedure of doing that. I have my own experience in my very first project. So I've been waited for permission for 4 years. It was a simple project, 4 years. It's absolutely not transparent. You don't know what is happening. And if you don't pay money, it's 4 years. So it's increasing, this transparency, increasing potential corruption, I would say. If you have transparency, corruption is impossible. So digitalization is very important to fight all these minor things, and as association, we're ready to help. So we have PropTech group, we have other people who can help with digitalization. We have companies who was involved in digitalization in other countries. So as an association and our companies, we're ready to help, but the government should have determination to do that.
Excellent. I mean, unfortunately, we don't have any time to accommodate more questions. Sergey covered everything, but I will just want to give half a minute to a minute to each one of you for your final words, and just to say that, you know, it's from my end, the concluding point is that we are in rapport when it comes to acknowledging that this is a fundamental infrastructure issue that cuts across the society as a whole, not just the ICT sector. And I think we have indulged in this conversation to identify the structural issues and how short-term, long-term planning and how pursuing digitalization initiatives that are inevitable for the country are becoming high on the agenda. So half to 1 minute each of you as a final concluding point, and we'll wrap it up. Yiannis.
So let's be proactive, let's not be reactive, let's try to find ways to solve today's issues and create the basis for the industry not to be in the same position again. Let's create a master plan for the island so we know where we're going. If we don't know where we're going, any road can take us there. That's very important. And because housing policy should be a hybrid document, let's create a body that will follow trends on this market and on global markets and bring suggestions and ideas to the table so we can continue to grow. Thank you.
Great. Christiana.
And as an entrepreneur, I would say let's make things faster, much faster. Because in Cyprus we have demand, huge demand. We have very strong construction and developing industry. It's really strong for the small country. And we have money. We have many investors who are willing to invest. We just need to connect all these pieces together somehow, and we're ready to help to resolve this problem, but action should be done faster. Thank you.
Christiana?
Oh, I just need 2 seconds. We have to be bigger, better, faster, quicker, and always transparent. That's it.
Great. Thank you all for your contribution. Thank you all for joining us.